All right. That was a fantastic explanation by Scott. We're going to keep this boat rolling. Esteban Carrillo. He is in there we are, Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle. Previously with Telesur English, and one of my favorite people to talk to. How you doing, Esteban? You doing okay today?
Hi, Jamal. Yeah, I'm doing good. Glad to be on the show.
Oh
How are you?
man, glad to have you. I'm sorry for the delay. It was I got my timing slightly off,
It's
but
okay.
thank
Don't
you
worry about it.
for joining me. Um, I have to start with what is taking place, oddly enough, in um, in Gaza, northern Gaza.
Mhm.
So the family of Doctor, and I want to get his name right because I always butcher it when I say it.
Mhm.
But this picture, I pointed out, is going to be iconic at some point, just for the
It should be
barbarity
already.
that created it. Yeah, it should be. Honestly, it should be. All of like many of these images should be iconic at this point. But Dr. Saif, I believe, but I
Yeah.
want to get it right. Give me 1 second to get it so I can see directly what that name is. But I was pointing out earlier today that this doctor stayed at the hospital
Hossam,
while it was,
Hossam Abu Safia.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank
Hossam
you.
Abu Safia. Yeah.
And it was Kamal Adwan Hospital.
Mhm.
Um, he stayed there while it was under siege, attending to his patients. And at a certain point, when the hospital was finally under siege, there was nothing else they could do. The people were pulled out, including patients. They were stripped. They were marched at the
Yes.
end of the bayonet with tanks all around. And eventually, when he got to the doctor's turn, they pulled him out. They shook his hand. They sent him walking in that image that I just showed, and they beat him with an electrical cord, according to the witnesses that were on the ground.
Exactly.
As- Astonishing barbarity. And it seems like they were doing it purely out of spite that he stayed there for that long. And by fight, I don't mean he picked up a gun. I just mean he stayed there and attended to his patients while this organization around him with all of the force that they had mustered. And they sent him to the prison that is infamous for rapes.
Yes. Not just for rapes, for extrajudicial killings. This is the same
And that
prison
too.
where Dr. Adnan al-Burj was tortured to death. You know, this prominent Palestinian surgeon from Al Shifa Hospital months ago. Jamal, this has been going for more than a year at this point. You know, these atrocities are on the daily. These images are absolutely nothing new in Gaza, and I think that this is, you know, a big problem, because when you say this is an iconic image, this should be an iconic image, you're completely correct. This should be the cover of every single newspaper, of every single magazine, of every single website. Should be talking about this, about how a hospital, the last functioning hospital in the north of Gaza, where tens of thousands of people still remain, has been burned to cinders, has been destroyed completely. Right after weeks of harassment, of attacks, of Israeli army using drones, using robots, using armored robots that they were blowing up. Right, they were making these. Because remember, at this point, Israel has all of the technology of the Western world available at its fingertips, not just in terms of intelligence gathering, but also in weaponry, right? So we have seen that they are using armed quadcopters to shoot children in the chest, you know, double tap them, as they like to say, once in the chest, once in the head. Where have you seen this technology used before? Where have you ever before Gaza seen armed quadcopters shooting at people? Before this started happening in Gaza, I didn't even know that was possible. I had absolutely no clue. Now it's a common occurrence. So now you also have these booby-trapped robots that are going to the doors of the hospital, that are going to the windows of the hospital and blowing up. You have these drones throwing grenades. You have snipers positioned around the hospital, shooting at anything that moves. And through all of this, through the artillery shelling and the airstrikes, Kamal Arwan Hospital was still functioning. To what degree? To how were doctors operating inside? How were they treating patients? Only they can know this. Only they can know the true calamity. Yes, this is Dr. Hassam Abu Asifa, who was giving statements almost on the daily. He was, thankfully there was still internet connection in the north of Gaza, or at the very least they were able to pass these videos along to be posted. And he was giving these accounts day in and day out, talking about the hundreds of patients who remain. Because again, the Israeli army gives this evacuation order, right, which is also such a misnomer. It's such a not how can we call it an evacuation order? That makes it sound like it's some sort of benign command, right? Like, oh, we want to get you out of the war zone. It's not that. We want to get you into the kill zone, right? We want to get you out of the building and into the kill zone. The video you just posted, right? These were medical staff and patients who were told to strip half naked and walk out in the middle of winter. In the middle of winter in Gaza to walk out. At the same time, we know that any Gazan, any Palestinian that is trying to cross from the north to the south of the strip, they have to go through the Netzarim corridor, right? This is an area that the Israeli military has established to keep control. And they are shot at, right? A few weeks ago, Haaretz came out with this report in which Israeli reservists were talking about the line of corpses, as they like to call it. The line of corpses is this imaginary line before the Netzarim corridor in which everyone coming from the north to the south gets shot, gets killed, with absolutely no explanation, no reason, no need, to even say anymore that they are terrorists, because the moment a Palestinian in Gaza drops dead, he's already a terrorist. It doesn't matter if he's a newborn baby that froze in the cold. It doesn't matter if he's the head of a hospital that is treating people that are trying to survive a Holocaust. It doesn't matter. They're all terrorists. And again, just to wrap up what you just said, he's taken the director of this hospital, a man who should be, Donald Trump is listed as person of the year, by Time magazine. As first of all, that's a label that matters anymore when you've seen the list of people that have been named. But second of all, it just shows you this disconnect that exists when a man that is giving everything that he has to help people survive a Holocaust is taken to a detention facility in which most Palestinians do not survive. And as you said, infamous, not just for sexual assault, but for systemic torture, for starvation, for the violation of every single human right, international convention, etc. What justifies this? What makes the head of surgery at Al-Shifa Hospital, who died in this prison, what made him a terrorist? The fact that he's a Palestinian. It's as simple as that.
They're heroes. And, in many respects, the truth of the matter is just because you do good things doesn't mean good things happen to you. And if you think over history,
especially
all things being equal, especially in Gaza. But I guess my thing is not just in Gaza, in general. I mean, if you think of some of the best people in history, those people became some of the best people because they were tortured and maligned and ostracized by some kind of power structure that they were effectively standing against. That man is going to be in the history books with all of them, and he deserves to be. I can't imagine the strain and the stress with you seeing people die around you that you, under normal circumstances, with the most basic of medical attention, could do something about, and yet you don't get that attention. And you are screaming to the world saying, help us, we're human beings. How can you ignore our humanity in this way as you support this genocidal regime?
Exactly.
And there is no response from the world as it happened. It is hard to wrap my head around that. It is hard to wrap my head around what he went through, what his patients went through, and the strength required to stand there and continue to do that job day in and day out. When the Israelis first saw him, they mocked him for not changing his clothes for 5 days. That was one of the first things they said to him, basically joking him for being not able to clean himself. And it's like that shows the depravity of all this, right?
Exactly.
You have right now. There's a campaign.
Like him walking to the tanks, right? Him walking head first into the tanks. This is the level of courage that in the Zionist entity, it's simply not even understood. There's not a level. There's not a person on the side that is committing a genocide that that has as much courage as Dr. Hossam Abu Sifa has in the tip of his finger.
That's right.
To confront this genocidal army head on.
They stay in their tanks. They stay in their barracks. When they went into Lebanon, they got their ass kicked when they had to actually fight Yeah, it's just disgusting. That story bugged me to no end. I look, under normal circumstances, I'm not a big fan of doctors, but I am a big fan of this idea of this kind of philosophical responsibility, like this notion that like I gave an example. It's a horrible example because it's Star Trek, but it works. There was an episode where the captain needed to do something, and in order to do it, he realized that it was going to be just exceptional pain involved. Like in the future, this was going to come back to bite him. He knew it was going to come back to bite him. And he like recoiled in fear over the thing that he had to confront. And he steadied himself. He said, I'm a Star Trek captain. This is effectively my job. And beyond his job, almost like a cosmic responsibility based on what he considers himself to be. He did the same. And he did it in the face of just knowing what was coming. And he continued to do his job. God bless him. I swear.
Exactly. Because again, just one last thing. This is I don't even remember the number, but at this point, these dozens of hospitals that have been come under the same type of attack. This is systemic. This is not an outlier. This is not Hamas stronghold. The UN just came out with a report saying that there's absolutely no evidence any of these hospitals were ever a Hamas, especially Kamal Adwan hospital that has been under siege for a couple of months or more at this point.
Yep. You're absolutely right. One of the other stories I really wanted to get to had to do with this notion that Jolani went from, I'm only here just for a short time, we're going to have elections. And now it may take 4 years for elections. It may take a while. We need to let things marinate for a bit.
Yeah.
And what he's effectively saying is, I need to get my power base in line first. Because it's not a caretaker government, it's a government. He's forming a government. Let's be honest with this, right? Even if you give him the best appraisal of this, you have taken power. You've deposed the other leader through terroristic activity backed by Turkey, backed by Israel, backed by the US. And notice, Israel continues to steal more land in Syria, and he does nothing about it. In fact, I go further with it. I would argue that he effectively sold Syria to Israel for power, because I don't know another way around it. It puts you in the mind of Lenin going into Russia during the First World War, where Lenin effectively created a civil war by dividing up Russia, giving part to the Germans in order to take power. And it is widely believed that he was sent there by the Germans to do exactly what he did to breaking up Russia. Jolani seems to have done the exact same thing. Israel takes more land. Anytime anyone in his government is asked about Israel, they abdicate all responsibility while simultaneously saying, we're going to make Syria whole. Okay, well, no, you're not. Israel has just stolen land in Syria. They're administrating it as an occupation. You are doing nothing and saying nothing about the fact that Syria is being Balkanized.
Yeah, they don't care. No, Jolani absolutely does not care. In an interview yesterday, he actually came out and admitted that this coup, this coup that HTS conducted in Syria, it prevented. These are his words. It prevented a very large regional a war against Israel, in which Syria, Iraq, and Iran would participate, which could embarrass Turkey. Push it to Syria. So this is the reason, right? Like he goes on TV. And he says, "Hey, like we took power in Syria because if we hadn't, this would embarrass Turkey and it would start a war against Israel." And now you see that the two main winners.
Just wait, just to marinate on that for a bit. We didn't want to embarrass Turkey by forcing it to choose sides with Iran to tackle Israel. Exactly. That is what Erdogan is called Hitler.
Yeah, exactly. These are his words. Right? This is Erdogan calling him Hitler, calling them, the Israeli army like they're like the Nazi army, etc. Erdogan is just a man that he's a political savvy, right? Like probably one of the most savvy leaders in the world. And I think that what he achieved in Syria more than proves it. But yes, to go back to your point, Israel at this point is they did this flash land grab, right? They grabbed about 500 square kilometers of Syrian land in the south. Just yesterday, they were walking into the center of Kunatria in the south of Syria, expelling government officials from the state buildings and taking control of them. And what does the Syrian government under the former the protege of the founder of ISIS and of and himself the founder of Al Qaeda in Syria? What does he say about this? Nothing. Even the governor of Damascus that he appointed said a few days ago, we have no problem with Israel, right? He said, our problem is not with Israel. And the problem is with someone else that is not taking over any of Syrian territory. But they are, if anything, about these former ISIS and Al Qaeda members, they're not dishonest, right? They're being pretty straightforward with these things. You can take the terrorists out of the military fatigues and the turbans, put him into an Armani suit. But their instincts are always going to be the same, and it's very interesting because it's been wow, like 3 weeks, 3 something weeks since the fall of the Syrian government, since Jolani, now calling himself Ahmed al-Shara, takes control of the country. Trims his beard, wears these fancy suits, and starts getting visits from absolutely every single Western and Gulf official. And now he's saying, no, elections are going to take 4 years, right? We are going to be here for at least 4 years. A constitution is going to take at least 3 years. And as you're saying, he's naming officials. He's named a foreign minister. He's named a defense minister, an intelligence chief, the head of the central bank, governor of Damascus, governor or whatever, etc. He's just naming person after person. Who are these people? They are all members of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They are all former members of Al Qaeda. They are all have ties with ISIS. They are all officials that al-Shara himself had already worked with in Idlib, right, in the northwest of Syria, where he has ruled for several years now. He's just transferring, right? He's just like picking from his own previous administration, semi-autonomous, maybe if you even want to call it that. He's just grabbing them, putting them in these new positions, and now they're going to be there for 4 years. The intelligence chief of Syria was also a former member of a former founder of Al Qaeda, former ISIS commander, etc. It's absurd, right? And you have all of these leaders sending delegations, meeting with them, giving them playties, giving them recognition. They are just handing them official recognition to this formerly, just a few days ago, still wanted terrorist, right? HTS is still UN, US, EU designated terrorist organization. It doesn't matter, I guess, right? As long as you prevented a war with Israel, a country that is committing a genocide, that is committing a Holocaust.
That's the wild part.
This is incredible.
Right?
That this is the state of things.
Yeah, that's the wild part. I mean, these guys who are warriors of Islam, as they call it, and yet Israel is stealing more and more territory, and they have nothing to say.
When they talk about we have 4 years, right? We're going to be here for at least 4 years. Remember one thing, and I want your listeners to always keep this in mind. All of these people, because one last thing, he gave he named to top positions a number of foreigners in the new Syrian army. He named, Egyptians, Jordanians, Turks, Turkmenistanis, Azerbaijanis, etc., just like from all over Central Asia.
These people aren't even Syrian.
Lieutenant colonels.
Yeah.
These people, when they came to Syria, and this is the last point I want to make, when they came to Syria, they didn't come to build a liberal democracy. They didn't come from Uzbekistan and from Turkey and from the US and from France as well. Okay, don't kid yourselves about that. And from wherever else. They didn't go to Syria because they wanted, to topple Assad and build a liberal democracy with diversity and accessibility for all. No, they want a caliphate. They want an Islamic caliphate. And remember, Al Qaeda and ISIS, they want a global caliphate, not a local regional caliphate. They want the entire world. And these are the people now that are being given a recognition by the international community.
Just astonishing. I mean, it really is astonishing. I mean, like, for one, to your point, they're not Syrians. Many of them aren't even Syrians. The majority of the people he's put into his cabinet are from elsewhere that he's going to give citizenship to now that they've overthrown the government of the country. And, it puts me in the mind of people who, will say, well, I have an open mind for things that make sense. And of course, the things that make sense to them is this kind of narrow window of things that they establish as being okay. And so from his standpoint, yeah, we're going to have an open Islamic country. And it's like, what about the Alawites? F those Alawites. Those people are going to get killed. And those people have been getting killed. Yeah. Christians have had their homes stolen. I mean, you've had people being dragged through the streets. I mean, this stuff is grisly. And the West is like, this is what democracy looks like. You should see the nonsense that comes out of this media here in the United States about what is taking place over there. It is astonishing. It is appalling. And I'm glad you brought up the point about the Turkey thing. I had forgot about that. How weird that is, where he's effectively saying, well, because keep in mind, Erdogan said, we had nothing to do with this. We have no idea how this happened. Assad should have negotiated, but our hands weren't on it at all.
Yeah. Remember, they wanted to normalize with Syria. For almost 2 years, they were begging and pleading and asking at every turn to normalize with Syria. And then all of a sudden, they are the first ones. Turkey is going to be the one printing Syrian IDs and passports. Yep. Turkey is extending power lines from the south into Idlib, into Aleppo, possibly into Damascus to provide electricity for Syria. And they're talking about, we are going to do everything to give Syria stability. Wow, all of a sudden, Turkey is...
Now they care about stability. Well, and the reason is obvious, right? Because if you have a country that is under the conditions that Assad was dealing with, then it's untenable. I mean, they were talking about people living like $5 a month. The government had no money to do anything. The military was barely paid, if it was paid at all. It was dependent upon things coming from Russia or, for that matter, Iran. And so now Erdogan is like, all right, we need to ensure that these are not the conditions that my new government, my new government in Syria, doesn't have to deal with. And so, yeah, we need you to remove the sanctions. We need to create stability in the country, in the region. You even heard him, the guy, Jolani. Well, we need to make sure the Russians stay because we need some level of stability in Syria. And, if the Russians leave, Israel is probably going to take that territory. Mm-hmm. Like, it is astonishing what is happening there. And the propaganda that's
and the way that is being normalized.
Yeah, it's very weird. Mm-hmm. By the way, do you think that they allowed him to be in that position because terrorists are easy to come up with a reason to topple? Meaning, yeah, we're going to let you take it for right now, but we're not going to have a terrorist really occupying that position of power for any length of time, per se. Like, do you think it's that? Because I am shocked that they're okay with the jihadists forming government, knowing full well what that means. I mean, we were hit on 9/11 by people like him.
The war on terror started because of Al-Qaeda, right?
Yes.
The 20+ year war on terror the catalyst was Al-Qaeda. And now, all of a sudden, Al-Qaeda is in power in Syria, and you have the U.S. State Department, Barbara Leaf, having a warm conversation with the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, with the protege of the founder of ISIS. And lifting the bounty and the IMF coming in and saying we are ready to help rebuild Syria. Like all of a sudden the coffers are open, the sanctions are being the lifting of the sanctions is being discussed. And I do think on the one hand the State Department, probably that is the calculus what you just said, which is if they get out of hand, we'll bring the next one, the next one in line. Jolani is just a dog. He's nothing but a dog. He's a dog in an Armani suit, a dog nonetheless.
What do you think of my argument that he sold Syria to Israel? Because I like for all of this talk about making Syria whole, that's not what's happening at all.
Not at all.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, Turkey is exerting a massive amount of control over it in one angle. Israel is taking it in another angle. The Americans are still there holding on to the wheat, or for that matter, to the oil. It's been balkanized by these forces that are in the country. I mean, Russia has been invited into the country, but even that's a power center on some level into the country, even though it's a minor one in considering the entirety of the country.
A few days ago, the Russian foreign intelligence was warning that there's a plan brewing to have ISIS
attack the base,
the Russian bases, right? Which it's not a completely, especially now, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. And I feel like a lot of the things that the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service had been warning since around 2022 or 2021 have come to fruition.
Yeah.
They were warning 2 years ago about the Ukrainians working with HTS and all of these terror factions in Syria.
Oh, and they were. Yeah.
And they were. And they were. And now we
Yeah.
have complete confirmation that indeed they were.
They were teaching terrorists how to do drones. And
Yeah.
apparently they wanted to take the war to Russia in Syria.
Yeah, so
They
I
can't
think
even
that
win
might
it in their own
actually
country.
the Ukrainian foreign minister was in Damascus yesterday, sitting with Ahmed
That's
al-Shara.
right.
So in all of their statements, to me, one thing that is fascinating about the way this is being covered, and I guess not just because the dishonesty of Western media, but more like I guess like the people who are internalizing this news, is that you're being told that a Sharia law and an Islamic republic is the source of all evil in the world and needs to be destroyed. But then Sharia law and an Islamic caliphate is not, right? So which is it, right? I thought that these people were supposed to be evil, and in particular, in Syria, as you're saying, these are former terrorists. These are, former, right? Like as if you can shed your head chopping ways, as if you can shed what you're saying, right? They're persecuting Christians, they're persecuting Alawites. The Syrian Shiites are terrified of what may happen next. And then meanwhile, in the south, you have Israel running rampant, and they're not going to leave. Who's going to make them leave? Who's going to make Israel leave Syria? Why would they leave, right? All of a sudden, their dream of greater Israel is right there. Greater Israel extends past Damascus and almost into Turkey. That's their actual, what they feel is their promised land. And also, this is also the Turkey's incursion in the north is also a threat to Hezbollah in Lebanon, because now all of a sudden, at this point, the Israeli army is saying they don't want to leave Lebanon. They don't plan to leave the south of Lebanon after the 60-day ceasefire ends, which was the terms they agreed upon at the beginning. If Hezbollah, which has said, if you don't leave, the only path is resistance, if they again decide to take up arms, all of a sudden they're going to have an entire ISIS/Al-Qaeda apparatus backed by the U.S. government, backed by the Turkish government, and supporting Israel at their back, right at their back. So you have changed the equation for the entire region all of a sudden. Right, and as you're saying, Jamal, this is not about reunifying Syria. This is exactly about balkanizing it, about tearing it apart. And the big question here is, I think at this point, because as I said, I don't think that there's any question anymore about Israel. Israel's staying in south of Syria. The real question is in the north, is with the Kurds, the Kurds that fight on the side of the U.S. What's going to happen to them? Because they are saying we want to join the new Syrian army. They are saying we are ready to join. They're a bit desperate.
Wait, are they saying that? I got a very angry email. He was very respectful, but it was very angry. And he pointed out, you don't know anything you're talking about the Kurds. The Kurds are Syrian. They have every right to be there. And he effectively took the piss out of me in the email. I guess my thing is, I don't have an issue with the Kurds one way or the other. Rojava doesn't exist. And, all things being equal, they fought on behalf of the United States against the Syrian government. Again, this is not a rah-rah for Assad. It's not that. It's more so that the moment that Assad leaves, all hell breaks loose. Just like when Saddam Hussein left, all hell broke loose. And when Gaddafi left, all hell broke loose. And that stuff is not to the leader themselves. That stuff is to the people who are living there. Like, there's nobody in this country that believes Saddam Hussein leaving in that Iraq war was a good thing, despite the fact that they may have all sorts of bad things to say about Saddam Hussein. Same thing about Gaddafi, and I suspect it's going to be the same thing about Assad.
Look,
give me your take on that.
Well, first of all, what I'm talking about the army, I'm just going to read you very quickly the quote from the commander of the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is a Kurdish militia that is in control of the northeast of Syria and controls and helps the U.S. maintain control of the oil fields. He says, a future Syria must have a single national army that defends the country. He says the weapons of the SDF will be the weapons of the national army integrated into it. And then he says for this to happen, the discussions are needed to reach a suitable formula, right? Discussions, of course, with HTS and with the factions that are currently waging war against the SDF, right? I'm just seeing now that the Pentagon on Monday said that a ceasefire in the north of Syria is still holding, and that is I'm gonna
No, it's not.
forgive my
SDF
French.
is just
That
taking
is
territory.
bullshit. That is a
Yeah,
complete
that's
lie.
nonsense.
That is
I
nonsense. It's
just,
not happening. The clashes are happening as we speak.
that's right.
There's over I think close to 200 at this point people killed in these clashes in which you have. And I have to apologize for your audience, because in Syria there is absolutely no shortage of acronyms at this point. It just gets very confusing very quickly in Syria.
Yeah.
But you have the SDF, right? The SDF, a US-backed Kurdish militia that has since 2017 been in control of Syria's oil and wheat fields. Why? To fund what they call an semi-autonomous administration, no, an autonomous administration in the north of Syria, which is, the SDF government, so to speak, right? They have been coming under attack for the past, since the fall of the Assad government by the Syrian National Army. The Syrian National Army is it's a melange of former ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Free Syrian Army fighters, right? Some of them at one point former Syrian soldiers, many of them, these so-called moderate rebels, and also many of them just a bunch of former ISIS and Al-Qaeda members. They have been launching attacks against the SDF in the east of Aleppo with Turkish air support. Why?
Mhm.
Because Turkey wants to get rid of the Kurds at their border, right? Yes, Kurds are Syrian, just like Kurds are Iraqi, and just like Kurds are also exist in the south of Turkey. They have
Exactly.
their legitimate struggle. They have their legitimate belief system, right, of what land belongs to them. But at this point, they are being attacked heavily by Turkey, because Turkey wants to eradicate the SDF. Why? Because the SDF, the main backbone of it, is made up of Kurdish fighters that belong to the People's Protection Units, the YPG, again, another acronym. The YPG is closely allied, has very close historical, up to this day, links with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, which is the terrorist organization that Turkey, a group that Turkey labels, and many in the West as well, a terrorist organization that they want to eradicate in the south of Turkey, and in the north of Syria, and in the north of Iraq as well. Turkey has been conducting airstrikes in those regions for a while now, for many months, even before the fall of Assad. So I think that's the real question right now, because these Kurds, they are supported by the US, but then on the other hand, this wouldn't be the first time that they are abandoned by the US, because this has happened already. It has happened a couple of times before, in which the US has essentially said, well, thank you for all your help, good luck.
My assumption was that they were going to be eradicated. I mean, and the reason why I thought that was, as you kind of pointed out, I mean, they continue with this notion of creating Kurdistan, and for some reason believe Turkey is going to be okay with them taking part of Turkey to do it. Most countries are not okay with losing territory.
Yeah.
And I get it, right? Going all the way back to the Ottoman Empire, but the borders have been added. It's not, I didn't add those borders, the Brits added those borders. But it kind of is what it is. The countries are going to defend themselves in the way that they defend themselves. From the standpoint of the Kurds, though, I mean, being that they're backed by the US, do you think the US is effectively saying, look, you need to join the new government? We help put that government in place. We want a stable government. We don't want these fighting to continue. We don't want a war on this front. And on some level, I would imagine the US government has to be, well, I'm concerned might be the wrong word. They might have assumed that a country that is accustomed to, let's say, religious liberty, meaning for all of Assad's ills, the one thing he did right was, I don't care what you worship. If you want to go out in a bikini, God bless you. If you want to walk around with no shirt on, God bless you. If you want to sunbathe, I don't care. If you want to be Alawite Christian, God bless. That is all of a sudden now you have one God, and that God is Allah. and it's my Allah, not your Allah.
My interpretation, exactly.
Yeah, my
Interpretation
interpretation of
what
it.
it is.
It's my God is the only God, and that there's going to be a huge amount of consternation associated with a country that is not familiar with it. Like, I couldn't imagine somebody coming into Washington D.C. and saying, "From here on out, all of you serve one God." It would just be astonishing, right? It wouldn't fly.
I mean,
Esteban,
I think the United, just what you're saying. I think the United
Mhm.
States' main concern is always just going to be Israel, right? It doesn't matter who has to go into the oven to safeguard Israel's right to self-defense. They're going to send them right in. So I think at this point, the Kurds, they are really caught between a rock and a hard place, because
yeah,
the Pentagon is lying, right? I mean, we know all of these spokespeople, they are hired because they're good liars. But this is absurd, because their allies themselves are giving out reports about how this is not true, about the ceasefire, right? It is not holding, and they are legitimately afraid that the ethnic cleansing is going to come back for them, because
yeah,
Turkey
yeah.
has already committed a genocide, right? Just 100 years ago, Turkey already
Mhm.
committed a genocide with the Armenians, and now they're seeing another state commit a genocide with the complete support of the entire Western media apparatus. Turkey is a NATO member in the end, possibly a lesser NATO member, right? Because Turkey is an Islamic state, and we know, right, that
Yeah,
racism runs very deep in all of these. In all of these organizations, Western organizations. So I don't know if they will get the same treatment as Israel, right? If they all of a sudden start just killing Kurdish people left and right. But I don't know. It's a brand new world. It's a completely brand new world, and I think the Kurds really need to start realizing that putting their chips in with the U.S., hoping that the U.S. is going to stand with them when push comes to shove, it's not going to go that
not
way.
too much. Esteban Carrillo. Man, thank you for this. I wanted to bring people who were really good friends of the show, people who I love talking to close out the year. And man, you have been one of them, whether it was on the radio show or this one. I deeply appreciate you, man. Thank you for this.
Thank you for having me, Jamal, and a happy New Year to you, and a happy New Year to everyone listening. And well, let's see what the future holds next for everyone.
And by the way, the Cradle, damn good.
Thank you.
Man, I
Yes, everyone
followed that
check out the Cradle.
publication. Damn good publication. Esteban Carrillo. He's a Beirut-based Ecuadorian journalist and current editor for The Cradle, previously with Tell Us Sir English. Have a good New Year, man.
You too, as well, Jamal. Bye.